composer. Let's talk a little bit about that. So you're really, in piping terms, a really successful composer. Volume of work, popularity. Your compositions are kind of, more or less traditional. You sort of stick to those forms. Is that really conscious? Have you tried to branch out and be kind of avant-garde a little bit?
I don't know if it's conscious or what my ability is. I've tried to write more stuff that, whatever the term is out there, non-traditional. I'm kind of a traditional person, I think, by heart. I like playing a lot of that stuff, and I try at times, like, I'm gonna write something that's different, and sometimes when I start writing it's different, and I'm not used to it, and I end up tearing the paper up because I'm not sure that I've just kind of made something up for the sake of notes.
Mm.
So I'm fairly traditional, and I think it's because I've always been in control of my playing and rhythmically based on compositions, and sort of, I'm not a theory major, but I have sort of keys in my head of where I like stuff to go.
Right. And what about, you've been constantly composing since since a young age. Do you find it like, you see rock stars or classical composers, gets more difficult as it goes along? Do you find it getting more difficult? Do you still have the same amount of ideas?
No, it takes longer to get ideas. Sometimes an idea will spawn 2 or 3 or 4. I don't sit down as often to write unless I have a reason, and I can make a reason up.
Mm.
Like I need to write a couple of Strasbergs to go on a set for a recital coming up. So I'll try and do something like that. But there was so many undiscovered wells not that many years ago that once you started hitting a couple of them, and they were kind of like gushers, you could keep cranking stuff out that was decent and different. Now it's tough. I look at influences that I like, and I try to write something that reminds me of that, not necessarily copying it, but I'm like, geez, that would be good. I like that feel. Can I do something? Would that be a jig, or do I want to write a march that reminds me of something like that? So it's a little harder. I do a lot of commission compositions, and I find it's a lot easier when I speak to the person. I know exactly what it is they're kind of thinking. How do they envision the tune being at the end? Who's it for? What's it for? Is this for a band to march down the street? Is this for someone's birthday? Is this a lament for your widow? Who was she? Was she bright and bubbly? Is it sad? And I get a feel for the song I'm thinking of, and then I start to try and create that way. And I think I always did that even in the band. I would think of something, this is what would be great to start with. I like this. I want these notes to syncopate. Now let's see if I can make something. Or I want this straightforward tune to go. And so it's usually from an idea, but it is at times more difficult. And you get a little more analytical about what you're doing, so writing bigger tunes is often trickier now, to get third and fourth parts of tunes that don't just sound like remakes of the first and second, which a lot of tunes do, and a lot of them are hard versions of the first and second part, but they're hard in a good way. A lot of the great marches, for instance. But you ask yourself, am I doing that, or am I just creating something that's unique? And unique is great first, because that means it's acceptable as your own, but unique's not always makes it a good tune.
Mm-hmm. So what about some of the more recent stuff, the Michael Gray pushing out the medley as a suite, as a new kind of avant-garde kind of thing. Have you ever been tempted to go in that direction yourself?
I've been tempted to do something else, to write suites and stuff. That kind of music that he composed would never come out of me. It's just It's not part of my musical makeup. I have a ton of respect for it. Um, and I think I have more respect for the fact I don't think I understood it as much. And I was looking for things in it, for anchors here and there, which maybe if I had more music education I wasn't supposed to find. Uh, I don't think there was anything wrong with it. I do think that in most places, and we did this in the Fraser, where there was an envelope, and we kind of just went a little past it sometimes and didn't turn it back. So when he first did it, it was exciting, but people didn't quite understand it. And then after a couple, it was packaged up a little bit. So it was good. I'd like to, as different as that is, I mean, we can call it a sweet avant-garde, call it, but pipe music that ventures away from traditional tunes, for what that stood for, I would 100% like to have it in my head and heart to create that, hopefully in another form, because I wouldn't want to put a piece together and have them say, oh yeah, that's you trying to create a Michael Gray thing, because that's not any good either.
So what about competition, and considering that the stamp of approval often is, does it do well in competition? Is there really room today to push the musical creative envelope in competition? Is it worth it?
There is. It's just a slow evolution. I think I want to take a guess and say in the next 10 years, you'll see a lot more of it. And because the senior people that are still judging will not pick newer tunes, there's nothing wrong with any of the great G.S. McClellan, John McCall, Peter McLeod tunes. But we should be able to get tunes sent out, recognized, and be accepted at major events.
Solo
It's solo events. It shouldn't take till you're dead. Bands, you don't have to submit, you get to play it. So it's been free form for a band. Here's a medley. We wrote the whole damn thing, like it or lump it. The fact that you don't really get to judge on the musical merit of tunes, that's a stickling point for me as a judge. I mean, if a band just plays absolutely correct and you can't judge the merit, well, they might as well be faking it by playing a Rolf pipe with bagpipe music writer. I mean, that's really what it's come to, some absolutely perfect playing. If you can't judge like, that tune for me, I'm sorry, it's good, but here's why it doesn't work, and this tune excited me. There should be marks of that. But hopefully, the bands have allowed it. The bands allow a lot of stuff. The RSPBA likes to let their judges accept it, but that they're not really allowed to comment on it. So they can't say the air, the hornpipe. They'll say something, the tune in 3/4 time, just in case they quoted that actual tune theoretically wrong. They're going to get hung for it. And it's just like, that's so wrong. They're just trying to remind themselves and remind you about the part they're talking about. Obviously, you know what they're talking about. So the composition in bands, I think, is great, that it's adventuresome. It's not often screened enough. I applaud the people trying to do it. And I know of a great composer and a great man who talked to me one year, and this would be edited out pretty well, but I sung a tune for him, and he just went, that's rubbish. And I thought, really? A lot of people seem to like this tune. I said, that's crap. And it was 10, 15 minutes later, he said, I didn't know what else to tell you. Like, you wrote this tune, who am I to tell you whether it's good or not? That was the lesson he was teaching me. He didn't think it was crap at all. He was trying to show me, who am I to say your tune's rubbish? And I thought, well, you're a pretty well-respected guy that should be able to give some opinion on that, I felt. So it's a really dodgy thing. You need composition to let the music evolve, But massive amount of one-hit wonders are they really that good if they only can stand a season? You know, if they come up again a few years later, great.
So what about your own compositions? What do you think your best tunes are?
That's really hard. I read that question that you sent me this week, and in the mood that you're in, it could be different. I've spoken and written and played airs at a recital that I've seen people crying at, and thought, wow, okay, that's doing something here. I've got to play. I've been allowed to play my own march at Oban and my own reel. I haven't picked one of my Strauss Bays yet. In the former winners MSR, it's like, okay, that tune must be able to stand up in the business. I've had tunes that have been really popular with bands. I mean, the new Davy, Little Strauss Bay, Sandy Gordon's been, I'm really happy with that. Is it my favorite and best one? If you're counting statistics and pennies, then maybe, because of the amount of wide screen that it's seen, because we don't get a chance to play all these other ones, and a lot of students play, and other people play tunes of mine, but they don't get picked. And what kind of receivership do they get if they're not at a big event? Donald McLeod's tunes got picked because he played them at big events, and they're brilliant. He's my idol composer. But the people said, the big man's playing that, and he made this, we should all be playing that. And that's what happened. And I honestly don't know if in the 50s and 60s, if his tunes were getting played all that much, or if it took 20 years, 25 years down the pipe for these things to start getting accepted. I'm starting to write a little more Pibroch, and I have one that's been played by several grade 4 people because it was written specifically for that. It's had lots of great reviews. That makes me really happy that I can create something that's playable by not the highest of experienced people, but it's a melody they can relate to with those technical aspects. So to say what tune, I don't know, that's a tough one. It changes all the time.
Well, how about this? What tunes or tunes do you wish you had composed?
Oh, let's see. I wish I composed "Happy Birthday." I'd be a rich man. There's 2 tunes from both spectrums right off the bat. The Green Hills, absolutely amazing piece of music that uses most of the chanter, that gets probably more ill treatment than anything else. It's a beautiful tune. If the bagpipe's in tune and the person plays the thing with some dots and cuts at maybe 10 beats slower than they're used to, ramming it through. Beautiful piece of music. The tune, easily my favorite tune, I think the best tune ever made. I would kill to have written it with Little Cascade. I still think it's by a mile the best thing ever made, because it works for a band, it works for a soloist, it works for a folk band. It can be played slow, it can be played fast, it can be played round, it can be played pointed. I don't know what you can't do where the Little Cascade is not just an amazing piece of music. So if I could have my ticket, it would be that in a heartbeat. That'd be a lottery win for me.
What about, you touched on collaboration a little bit, with Bill Livingston and Michael Gray working on compositions together. First of all, did that work? And, it seems like pipe music is generally a solitary kind of compositional thing. Should there be more collaboration between, you and, Stuart Little or something? Or
I think
do you think that can work?
I think it can work. I think if you know the person's personality and you understand what they write and what you write, it can. To force it on, I'm not sure that works. I mean, we never really forced it, Michael and I. They were just thoughts of, got an idea, and I'm kind of stuck here. And that's where it sort of started. I keep going to D here, and I don't want D. Can we do something? Well, half a bar back, why don't you do this? And that's how the collaboration sort of started. And he would come up with something, completely different than I would think of. And I was like, oh, wow, that works. That's cool. And so we started doing that. I think there's those combinations in bands, and I think just for people to not try it would be crazy. I mean, there's everybody's everyone's trying to compose, and I don't know if it's because they feel they can or they feel this freedom of speech to do it. I mean, there's a whole lot of, and I don't like to say this in a negative way at all because I promote it, but there's a whole lot of really, really bad composition out there. And unfortunately, I get calls quite often, and can you look through a few tunes? I don't like to do that. Ever since that chat with the person who talked to me about my tune. And I tell them that, it's like, I might not like any of your tunes, and that just might be because it's not my style, or I just don't see it fitting into a band I play. Doesn't necessarily make it wrong. And sometimes that's also being polite to say, I don't really like any of your stuff, but who am I to tell you I don't like your stuff?
Yeah.
And the odd time I've done it, sometimes a book of like 50 tunes comes instead of 2 or 3. So it's people that they write because they can put combinations of notes together. But if you don't, nothing ventured, nothing gained. So give it a whirl. Why not? I collaborated a bit with Alex. I've collaborated actually recently on, I think, 4 commissions now, and I've got a couple more to do with my father, which is just really cool. Because a few years back at home, my mom found another box of stuff when she was getting ready to move out, and it was just papers that my dad had, and he had a couple of tunes that he'd written, but a lot of stuff that said Owen Music. It was just Owen Music. And when he did his pipe majors course, a lot of that was composition. They had to dream up stuff. So I've gone through several pages and dug up things that I thought, geez, this is a nice couple of bars here, and I kind of like this ending. I'm not sure about this, and maybe I shouldn't do that, but I kind of took poetic license and went, I can make something good. So I've been pretty happy with a few of the tunes I've been able to put out, and most happy to typeset it and put Ray Gandy, Bruce Gandy, because that's a link that I just never really got to have, So it's like he dreamed the idea up. I filled in the rest of the puzzle here.
So it's been a while since you put out a book of music. Is that we'll be seeing some of those compositions coming in a new publication?
I don't know, because the book market is just so terrible now. However, the group that did my last book has been really good, and they're willing to give me a really good price on a super small amount. Because there's only a few people that honestly want to collect a book, and I would probably do it like my last book, where it's an ebook, and you can get to any page you want at any time.
Yeah.
But I would have the paper copy available. Maybe I only make 50 at a time or something, and for those collectors who want them. But mostly I'm kind of doing the tunes now as an instructional learning tool on my website, where it was a talk with Ian McDonald, Ian McDonald, about we've always had this chat. How did G.S. McLennan really play a little Cascade? Nobody's got a definitive way. And I thought, not at all to put myself in that place, but I thought, well, I'm writing all these tunes. Why don't I put them down how I think they should be played, the way I made them? And also, this doubling here, I put that in because I like it, but I don't really see that you need to play it. Or this D strike, do it this way. D throw, here's how it's written, play the heavy one, play the light one. Those are on all my videos, sort of what I think you can do with my tunes. And by all means, take it for what you want, the root, and change it around. So that's been mildly successful. A lot of work, but it's kind of a labor of love. I'd like to, we have a lot of Donald McLeod stuff. We don't really know how he would have taught his tunes to be played, but we have him playing a lot of his stuff. But we don't have a lot of the great players playing their stuff. I mean, do we know for sure how much faster than they would like to play some of those older guys played? I mean, a lot of it had to do with the speed of the recording and the fact that the recordings got sped up. Was he at 72? Was he at 78? Was he at 84? So how did John McCall play all these tunes? So when I put my competition marches down, I try to put a video out of me explaining it for 7 or 8 minutes. And I think that's a more value right now than another book. But it's going to be all gathered, or it'll be a collection of all my tunes or something. Because there's a lot of them now. There's another 40 or 50 tunes probably ready to go, I think, since the last book, in around there.
So what's your process for composing a tune? You talked a little bit about, commissions, about getting an inspiration and taking your time, ideas for tunes. So what would your general kind of approach be to making a tune?
I try to remind myself it's time to start writing again. That's one of the things I often forget. I get complacent about it. And geez, I should be writing some tunes again, get some ideas. Or I'll hear the band and I'll think, I like the 2 jigs there. Now, if that was a jig set, what could I tag on with that? That might be a thought. Because I want to write a jig, so I'm kind of coming up with a place for it. Or, here's a couple of marches. I don't want them to be these heavy marches. I want them to be a 2/4 that's kind of moving along briskly for a recital. Tune I like Centenary Jewel, That's a kind of a rounder, major key, slightly quicker than your march. If I wanted to write something cheery and happy to go along with that. So I kind of think of that, or I don't want that, I want something else. What am I looking for? I want to make a message. I want to create a beginning of something, like when I did Starburst to start a jig set. So I usually try to think of something, and then I start to create ideas, and often the tune ends up completely different than the original thought, but it just gives me something to start with, and then I go from there.
What about the state of piping composition today? You talked a little bit about the 1.5-minute one-hit wonder that's here today, gone next year. Do you think it's a healthy state of composition?
Yes, because not composing is very unhealthy. But, and I'm not the person to be the screener, but this is where we have a lot of judges, yourself being one, who have lots of years of hearing different medleys and different tunes, and so many bands. And I'm gonna lump it in and say grade 3 and 2, who are pretty good, but maybe don't have the super wealth of knowledge that the grade 1s do, or connections, that will put in these new tunes because they got to have some flashy stuff, or they got to have their own air, they're going to have something. And some judges should be able to write, good try here, but this just doesn't work. And it's not that it's unhealthy, it's just the idea is good. And speaking with someone not long ago, talking about composing tunes, when you start to write and you get into the second part and you're in an area, just for example of something, when you play that and pencil it in enough times, it makes sense. It was Robert Matheson, because familiarity starts to breed this it's okay thing. And we were talking about this in Florida. And you could be writing stuff and almost be in discord with yourself, but you've played it so many times that it's making sense in your own head. Everything I write, every single tune that I write goes out to a person who I have great respect for their knowledge of tunes and their vast repertoire, and they hear a ton of tunes, and they hear everything I make before it goes to public, so that they can help with, yes, it's unique, it doesn't sound like you didn't just rewrite Dr. Ross, although you forgot about that, and it's good, and they'll say, I'm not sure why you're doing this. I get the kind of mood you're in here, but why are you doing that? And make me think about it to complete the project right. And bands don't do that with an outside figure who could say, beautiful. Because when the band starts playing whatever it is, 3 tunes in a row. It doesn't matter if it's a medley or a piece of a concert set, and everyone starts clicking together and the drumming's starting to do it. You can make something that's maybe musically not that great start to sound pretty good. And in the end, it might win a prize because it's chanters in tune and drones in tune and drum rhythms good and there's some ensemble. But you ask what was that tune on Monday morning, like I haven't a clue how it goes, but they played it good.
Right.
To me, that's I don't want to write that, and I want someone to tell me if I did because I'll burn it. I don't want that left in my.
So you would recommend, always having an editor, like on the outside, sort of giving constructive
100%.
feedback, honest feedback.
Honest trustworthy editor. It takes a while to find the person. I'm very happy with who does this for me, and I run it by a couple of people, but one for sure. And you need that because you get grown and everything makes sense to you. So you send out your stuff and it's all brilliant according to you.
Right.
And then you really need to let down, and then if you start letting down, well, who are you to say that? And it just becomes a whole mess of nasty. It's not necessary.